from Washington State.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today as your city goes through these difficult circumstances. I've heard a lot of discussions over the past few weeks about public safety and crime in Washington, D.C., here on the Hill, and from my friends and neighbors who live in the District of Columbia. And these concerns about crime have been used as justification for President Trump's militarization and occupation. Like my Republican colleagues, I believe that federal government has a role to play in improving public safety. I would also say, like my Democratic colleagues, we believe that everyone deserves to feel safe. Where we seem to differ is that I prefer to focus on proven, not performative solutions. Proven solutions are those that invest in community, but my Republican colleagues arbitrarily cut $1 billion from the DC budget in March of this year, which has impacted the city's ability to fund the police, firefighters, and other public safety programs. And then, while holding these funds hostage, the president deployed National Guard in the name of public safety, instead of giving DC the funds necessary to provide safety. And at the same time, Donald Trump and congressional Republicans have made the largest cut in history to Medicaid, regardless of the fact that Medicaid expansion under the ACA led to a significant drop in violent crime nationwide. What we're seeing from this administration is unlawful, undemocratic, and follows the playbook of an authoritarian government. Across the country, a total of more than $4 billion in federal funding that supports American families, businesses, and local governments has been frozen or terminated. Withholding these federal government funds that have been constitutionally appropriated by Congress can and will be used to coerce other American states and cities into cooperating with this rogue administration in fear of having their cities occupied too. In Pierce County, in my district, they have nearly $200 billion of federal funds that could be at risk, which includes $706,000 grant from the Department of Homeland Security's Targeted Violence and Terrorism Prevention Program that was abruptly terminated. These funds were dedicated to implementing, like the name says, targeted violence threat assessments in our schools to mitigate youth violence and radicalization. The Department of Homeland Security's letter stated that the grant was being terminated in part because the department, consistent with President Trump's direction, is focused on advancing the essential mission of enforcing immigration laws, securing the border, and combating anti-Semitism. Consequently, grant projects that support or have the potential to support activities not aligned with DHS's current focus do not effectuate the agency's current priorities. What is so explicitly clear to me is that this administration's excuses of sending the National Guard to local cities in defiance of the local governments in order to address crime and improve public safety are an absolute sham when they are canceling funding left and right that would actually help our local governments address these very issues. Mr. Jackson, could you speak to how public safety is affected when you defund programs like targeted violence and terrorism prevention grants?
Yeah, I mean, a critical resource of our federal government has been helping states prepare to identify and intercept targeted violence across the country. In fact, the Department of Homeland Security was required to work with state government on that. But those resources through CISA and other preparatory agencies or departments are under siege. But what we're also concerned about is just the direct federal law enforcement resources for agencies like the ATF that are specifically focused on intercepting guns from getting into our communities. And again, with cities like DC, where 95% of the guns are coming from outside the state, that federal law enforcement is crucial, but are now experiencing over 40% cut.
Would you say, in your experience, that local investments, like funding for local law enforcement, funding for targeted violence and terrorism prevention, funding for ATF programs, would have a greater effect on public safety than the militarization of our cities?
It's a fact. And frankly, that's what we've seen over the last 2 years with a 31% reduction in homicides, This year, we're still tracking for another 20% reduction in homicides, and we think that's a direct result of the resources to prevent violence before it happens.
Thank you for your answer, for your work, and Mr. Chairman, I yield back.